And am I right in thinking, Andy, unless it's a myth, that Johnny actually blanked you down the street at one point, not long before the meeting in France?
Well, it was actually it was probably actually about 5 years before that. Because we spent 10 years apart, as it were, and I saw him midway through the what do we call the decade before this one? The
Tens, is it? No.
Yeah, the tens. I saw him in the tens. Sorry, I saw him in the tens, and yeah, he didn't. I mean, it makes more sense to me now since we've been back together. It makes more sense to me that encounter. But at the time, it made no sense to me at all because I hadn't seen him for about 6 years, and he did talk to me, but it was really odd. It was like it was like we didn't it was like we didn't know each other, and it was very odd. And I left that meeting feeling you can't. I think I said it before, kind of like I'd seen a ghost in a way because I've thought about him a lot, obviously, and it was very very bizarre. So yeah, so Ben coming along and sort of putting this together was really quite it was really quite magical, and I have to say, testament to Ben, he wasn't angling for when I first met him, he wasn't angling for like a band reunion. He wasn't angling for anything other than just me and Johnny talking, which I always thought was really very cool of Ben. He was just like, look, I really think you two should talk. He talks about you a lot. You talk about him a lot. I'm sure there's a way to make this work. And yeah, I really, I think we owe an awful lot to Ben. I don't think this is just a film that he's made. I think he was instrumental in getting this band back together. I don't really sort of hear enough of that from us as a band, which is fair enough. Everybody's got their own take on it, but for me personally, Ben is a massive, massive reason as to why we're back together, and I think it's brilliant because as the years go on, I've realised just how special it is. How unbelievably special it is to have it back in my life, even though it's not the easiest of bands. Um, it's amazing to have it back in my life, and I think that Ben is. I owe that to Ben personally. That's how I feel.
Oh, Andy, thank you, mate. That's
Yeah.
makes it all well because we've waited like 2 years to kind of get the film out there in like a wider release, and we had a brilliant night premiering it at Raindance Film Festival, and that was such an exciting time. And since then, I've had probably an email every other week, not exaggerating, a lot of them from France and lots of people all over the world, just kind of asking like, is this coming out? Like, where can I watch it? And I've just had to say, I think it's coming soon, but truthfully, because I was approached to make the film, I can't say it was like an original idea that I had. I was immediately buzzing to try and tell the story, or just at the very least make a really banging trailer with Johnny at the heart of it, and explore that. But I think so much of it was down to timing. We started filming in January 2020, so that was before the lockdown, the pandemic, and everyone's life going on pause. Might have been a really big reason why Johnny and Andy were more open-minded, why Carl was more open-minded as potentially reuniting with the band. So that was a huge, that was good fortune that it was that time for everybody. But it was honestly, for me, it was just heartbreaking hearing two dudes who were like it was so positive, and then that was just one area of the life where I just kept thinking, you just guys have got to just talk it out. And then I think even if it doesn't go anywhere, I think you'll just respect each other again and be like, to be able to listen to each other and hug it out would be like the best case scenario. And I remember it was so on and off for a long time, like understandably, like Andy had loads going on and Johnny had loads going on, and there was no right way to do it. It was just a complete fluke that Andy at the time was on holiday in France, and Johnny was basing himself over in France at the same time, and it was just like, this is going to be a crazy adventure, but maybe I come down, we bring a couple of cameras and we just try and set it up, and like Andy's been so kind in saying what he said, but it was so hard, honestly, so hard I had to just basically persuade Andy and Johnny, you've got to trust me wholeheartedly here that I'm not gonna fuck you over. It'd be so easy and so like TV to remind Johnny of things that have been said, and remind Andy of things that have been said, to try and like get the sparks going on camera. And that is effectively, unfortunately, how a lot of reality telly is made, and they build up to this big moment of tension and it all explodes on screen, and that couldn't be further away from what I wanted. I just sort of thought, well, let's keep this setup as simple as possible. Even the producer, Robbie, who was with us, who, funnily enough, Johnny actually, Johnny thought that Robbie was Andy when he first got out of the car, because they both got this beautiful long blonde hair, and that's something I wanted to put into the edit, but it just didn't make sense in the end. I didn't have any fun with Robbie to sort of justify it. But anyway, like the fact that like, I chose Robbie to do it because he's so emotionally intelligent, and I never asked him to like reverse the car into the drive, but we were so aware that this could actually go like horribly wrong, for reasons well beyond our control, that like we actually just would have the quick getaway if it was too much, if it was just not cool. So but when we were sort of behind the cameras and it was just letting it happen, it was like it was mad to experience. So I'll always be grateful that Andy trusted me like Johnny did, that I just said, I promise you I would never walk you into something that could be awful, and just let it.
It's so weird now. It's so weird now thinking back to that weekend or whatever it was, or week or whatever. I was really nervous, and I was, even though I'd spent a bit of time with Ben. I never didn't trust him, because you can look at this beautiful man. How could you not trust him? But I was worried. I was really worried, and I was on holiday with my very good friend Dom, who plays drums in Muse, and I'm with him most. Well, I'm with him most of the time, I suppose. But I was with him that summer, and he actually came along with me because he's met Ben before, because I think Ben's done some work with Muse. And Dom came along with me to meet Ben up in the little village in France, because I think Dom was a little bit. Dom was also a little bit suspicious of what was going on, and was kind of being a good mate and being a little bit like, I'm going to come with you for a little bit and see. Is that right, Ben? Is that he was there?
It's totally fair. He was honestly, he was like your
yeah. He came along.
Best mate. And he was really trying, kind of, I guess, if you're maybe, I'd sort of related to if you were dating someone and the kind of protective big brother.
Yeah. And it was
kind
quite,
of make sure that they're like decent.
Yeah, it was quite sweet, really, because so we both went up, and it sort of it became pretty apparent very, very quickly that we were in a little team together here, and I knew that Ben was on both mine and Johnny's side, if you will. And I know it seems very dramatic to talk about it, especially the funny thing about all of this is that with everything going on in the world right now, anything in rock and roll or entertainment seems kind of like fairly sort of jovial and insignificant, but it was a big deal for me. It was a big deal for me, and it was a big deal for us, and I was really nervous about seeing Johnny again. I really was. And we were talking about reversing the car back out, weren't we? We were talking about, like, if this goes wrong, don't worry, you can jump straight back in the car and we'll zoom out of here. It was that kind of vibe.
Yeah,
and as I say, I know that sounds over the top, but that's where my head was at, and that's what it felt like on that day, for sure.
Yeah,